So what is predictive hiring? I mean, in a nutshell, predictive hiring is when we start to bring in quantitative data to define what leads to success in a role so that we can find candidates that match that. And we can start to evolve this approach to start to learn from what is working and what isn't working. So, to take a step back, generally as we go to find the candidates and to fill roles, it's very qualitative. It's about responsibilities, key technical skills, right, and then maybe some goals and outcomes for the role. Then we like job ads, and then we go into a screening process, which may have some cognitive assessments or some written assessments, and then interview-based approach. Now, the hard part with that structure is how do you start figuring out what are the actual things that lead to success in a role? And the more people I've hired and the more experience I've seen and the more data I see, the technical part is an element to it, but there is so much more that's happening. And so what we're trying to do is close the loop on this. So what we do through predictive hiring is we start to look at behaviors and traits that an individual has that leads to success in that particular role based on its responsibilities. So this is what we call role profiling. And you go through and you look at a role and you discuss with the hiring team, which behaviors here do we think gives it the best chance of success? And you're choosing a behavior over something else. So we're going to dive into now what a role profile looks like and what these decisions are.
What we have here is a new role, and this is for a business development role that we've mapped through a 10-minute survey, and it's then going to define what an ideal archetype, what behaviors and traits we believe will lead to success in that role. And then that's defined by here, and these black lines indicate the levels of certain traits that we believe are ideal. It will map in a brain profile between logical, systematic, people-oriented, and conceptual that leads to success in this role. And then that all shapes what believe is the best archetypes for this role, which is a business development role. And so it's looking at promoters, connectors, campaigners, which are all people orientated archetypes, which makes sense. And then what we can do is we can bring in candidates. So these are some 2 candidates, and then you can click on them, and this is the red dot belongs to Claire and the blue dot belongs to Michael, and it's going to compare them to the role. We can also bring them into a spotlight. And what we can see here is the role alignment is a 4 out of 5. This is the archetype. And you can then compare each of these between Claire and the role and where some differences turn up, as well as between these factors. You can also then switch over to here, and this is a different person now, has some much greater differences, and you can see a 1 out of 5 alignment score, and where these differences come from. And this essentially is what role profiling and role fit is, where we're comparing the brain profiles of a person and the ideal person for a role defined through a survey, which is the role profile. You can then download individual reports.
So now as we go through that example, we now have an idea of what a role profile looks like. What you're then doing is you're screening candidates and you're collecting their profiles and you're comparing them to this ideal role profile you've designed. Then what you can start doing is in your interview process, in your screening process, you start to see where there are potential gaps and differences, and that can now guide you on how you want to screen, right? To make sure that, is this going to be an issue? You can probe into these areas. So it's giving a bit of structure now to where you want to lean into. And especially if you have different people that are making the decision on whether you want to hire a person or not, it gives you some structure to have that conversation where it's not like everything's on the table and anyone can talk about anything around this person. We're now going to break it down into core behaviors and traits. So it also makes having a general discussion on a candidate much easier. Now where it starts to get even more interesting is now down the track. As you start having performance reviews and you start setting this up and people start to exit this role and you're determining did it work well for them or did it not work well with them, this is now data that you can tie back to your original decision-making process. You can start to evolve. Do we actually know what behaviors lead to success in this role? And you start tweaking it and changing it. You think, well, all these people were like this and that didn't actually work in that role. Maybe we actually need someone more like this or like this. And you start seeing that and you start getting that feedback. This is where we're now got a quantitative way to start defining what a role is, how to go find it, and how to keep iterating, right? To better understand the role and then to better find people that suit the role. That's what we mean by predictive hiring.